we're going to present briefly in 15 minutes. This is an incredible exercise of trying to be synthetic. We're going to present first the methodology, not the methodology, but the parameters that we use for the MPI, the global MPI, the international MPI. Then we briefly some general results with the MPI, including the latest analysis that we've done with analysis over time. And finally, we're going to present on the one specific example of how this analysis can be done in one country, which is India. So first, we always like to say that this is the work of a very big team. Some are here and have helped with the data analysis, processing, and so on, including Lucia, Isela, who was around there, Chris, and Anabas as well, and so on. So we all been involved. There's a very group of people involved in this work. So just what we present had to do with some of what is new in this year analysis. The MPI was launched in 2010, then it was updated in 2011, and then finally was updated again in 2013. So the MPI, the global MPI, is based on mainly international household surveys. So it's the DHS, the Demographic Health Survey, for a number of countries, 51 countries. The Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey, which is done normally both between UNICEF and the National Offices of Statistics for 30 countries. Then the World Health Survey for a number of surveys, and for certain countries that are listed here in the slide, we use National Household Survey because there was not a better data, that was the better data to use. So what is included in the global MPI? It, of course, partly is restrained by the data because we had to, the efforts when Sabina and Maria Emma Santos were designing the index was to be able to do a comparison across all this number of countries, more than 100 countries. So partly is constrained by the data. And it's also, it takes into account the international agreement in MDGs and so on, and it follows the structure of the HCI with health, education, and living standard, and so and 10 indicators that are nested on them. So a household is considered deprived in nutrition if at least one individual for which there is information in nutrition is malnourished, if it's suffering child mortality, if it has experienced child mortality, it deprived in years of schooling if no one in the household has less than 5 years of education. It's deprived in school attendance if not any of the children that are between 1 and 8 years school grade are not attending school. Then it's deprived in a number of living standard indicators related some with MDGs, cooking fuel if they use organic cooking fuel, sort of wood and organic materials, in improved sanitation based on the MDG definition, or if the sanitation are shared. Safe drinking water is also the MDG indicator on safe drinking water, and the water has to be at least a 30 minutes way back to fetch it. Then electricity, if it has electricity, fluorine, if it has natural fluorine, and acid is a group of indicators associated with related with a combination of them. So if the household has at least a car or a truck, then it's non-deprived acid, and then if it's not, then consider a number of small acids, including TV, refrigerator, TV, refrigerator, bicycle, motorcycle, so there's a small number, and it had to be deprived in at least 2 of these indicators. So that's a quite general number of indicators, but they certainly capture some of the indicator of the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals. And so, as James and Sabina have explained, in the AF methodology, and these follow the AF methodology then for the mathematical structure of the final index, It's not enough to be deprived in one indicator, but it has to be deprived in a combination of the indicator at the same time. So for example, here we have the case of MDAC, and she's deprived in 73% of indicators, which are the one highlighted here in the graph, which in the second bar at the top shows in how many weighted indicators they are. The structure of the MPI follow a nested weight indicator, so same weight for dimensions, and within the dimension the same weight for the indicators. And in order to be multidimensionally deprived for the MPI, it has to be deprived in multidimensionally poor in the MPI, it has to be deprived in 33% of the indicators. So she is, as you can see over there, she's definitely above that. So it's not enough to be deprived only in one of the assays. Even a standard indicator, you have to be deprived in more than one simultaneously to be multidimensional. And 33% represent the weight to the full dimension. So it would have to be a combination such of indicator that represent the whole full dimension. And it follows then the adjusted head count that James explained a bit ago. So quickly, in some results, we won't be able to go into much detail, but it covered 5.4 billion people, the whole surveys that we include, that is 78% of the world population, of which around 1.6 are multidimensionally poor. And here we have how the distribution of the different countries is. Here at the bottom is the percentage of poor, the head count, and here the intensity of deprivation. And what you can see is that there's quite a wide, although first there is of course a correlation between both, but there's a quite range of levels according to the income level. The color represents the income level, and you can see in the low income level it goes in a quite wide, and then in the upper middle income country there's also quite a wide spread. 50, then where do the poor people live? Well, we've seen our result is that a large percentage live in South Asia, 51%, much more than the proportion of people who live in South Asia, and 3/4 of the world poor live in middle income countries, low or middle income countries. Now, briefly, some of the analysis that we did over time, we took from all the countries, we had data that was the same data that was in our view for some criteria that we followed, that it could be used for analysis over time for 22 countries, which are these ones that are highlighted here. And we went through a process of standardizing the indicators so they could be comparable across time with some certainty. And here are some of the results. This is the reduction of poverty in each of the countries. The top 3 countries with the highest reduction, Bangladesh, Rwanda, and Nepal. And then in the top 7 include Bolivia, Cambodia, Tanzania, and Ghana. And some countries with a much lower level of reduction. 18 countries out of the 22 countries show statistically significance. So now, I'm just going to put a lot of emphasis in this, and I'm going to pass it to Suman, because I think this is quite important to the adjusted head count, which is how did the poverty was reduced? So poverty, because the adjusted head counts include both the intensity of deprivation and the number of poor, then it can be reduced either for the intensity or for the incidence. If you reduce both, then it's the best situation. If both goes up, it's the bad situation, or it could be a bad good or a good bad. What happened? Well, this is what we have in the 22 countries. And what is interesting is that there are countries that reduce the same level in head count, so the number of poor was reduced in the same level, but the intensity of deprivation was different. Bangladesh, Bolivia, Malawi, and Ethiopia. And so if we didn't have the adjusted head count, we wouldn't be able to see that actually Bangladesh did much better than Bolivia in reducing multidimensional poverty. And so we see some different groups. The case of Ethiopia, where mainly reduced intensity of deprivation, but the poor continue being poor, just less deprived. And this as Jane was explaining, that it's not only an index, but it's a group of indexes, not one number, but a group of numbers that are interrelated and they can be expressed in different ways. So from some work that our colleague here, Mauricio, worked with Gaston, it's possible to do some decomposition of the change. So you can see, for example, here at the top, how much was increased in each of these three countries, and here on the right, the percentage of contribution that either intensity or incidence had in the overall reduction. So you see in Ethiopia, 55% of the poverty reduction was due to the decrease in intensity. Whereas in Nigeria, mainly was a reduction of incidence, and in Rwanda was a combination of both. So Nigeria might have done closer to Rwanda if he had also reduced intensity, not only the incidence. And that's what we have done in the 22 countries. You can see here that there's a diversity of way in which it was reduced. And so to pass it to Suman, just in the same way that Sabina has already explained, it can be broken down by dimensions. Suman is going to explain for India. And also we can see whether the groups that were most deprived are catching up with the group that are less deprived. The new high-level panel report of the 2015 said, among one of the four main points, that the new MDGs should not leave anyone behind. And so that's the analysis that we can do. So for example, in Rwanda, all the regions reduce poverty equally. But do they have to reduce poverty equally, or should a region that is poorer reduce faster to catch up with the region that is less poor? So well, that's what happened in Nepal, where the regions that are poor are catching up with the regions that are less poor. And so I close here, but not before telling you that we have put quite a lot of effort in creating tables, poverty maps, and country briefing that takes a lot of effort and dedication from Suman here and from Emma, who's at the back. There's a lot of different work that we have produced that goes more than simply an academic paper, and that is all available in our website, precisely to facilitate people who want to use the data beyond the analysis and take it into practice. So the data is just in what we call the MPI data bank.
Thank you, Rosie. So I will take 5 minutes to present very briefly our findings on India in detail, where we explored change in poverty, the dynamics across time with a gap of 7 years. So we used 2 rounds because international MPI was computed for DHS 2005-2006. We went back to DHS 1998-1999. Most of the indicators were comparable, but a few adjustments in order to preserve stricter comparability across 2 periods. As you can see, we call it MPI-I for India, MPI for India. MPI fell statistically significantly with larger reduction in the incidence than the intensity of poverty. I would also like to point out that per annum reduction in the incidence of multidimensional poverty was higher than the per annum reduction in the consumption expenditure headcount ratio that we obtained from Temple Country Report. The national reduction, however, has not been shared equally across all subgroups. As we can see, slower progress was evident for the poorest groups. Among religion, it's among Muslims, and then for caste, it's among Sunni tribes. We also look at states, and clearly the map shows the southern states, which are in greener color, showed larger reduction over the same period than some of the states in northern India, which were poorer to begin with. As Roche explained, we can break down the overall change in multidimensional poverty to understand whether it came from incidence or intensity. There are wide variation across states. Some states reduce intensity relatively more than the other, and other reduce incidence more. We also try to see if, at least in terms of states, if they are ranking similarly in terms of multidimensional poverty and income poverty. There is a wide difference in the rankings, so it requires that, as Professor Sen also mentioned, it requires understanding why the differences are and what is causing these differences. In order to understand how the overall reduction in MPI was obtained, we broke down the change across indicators. The standard of living indicators showed larger reductions. However, we have to keep in mind that when we construct an index, we weight them differently. So weights play a role as well on how much they have contributed to the overall poverty. Looking at different states, the state of Andhra Pradesh, it is subcircled in red, and Kerala, they reduced multidimensional poverty the most across states. However, they did it with different patterns. Andhra Pradesh had more uniform reduction across indicators than Kerala. Now I will take some time to discuss, as I mentioned earlier, to understand the group of people that we try to identify as the poorest of the poor, or the ultra poor. We use two different definitions. By one definition, we call the poor section as intense poor, and then with another definition, we call them deeply poor. And the intersection of these two approaches can be considered as extremely poor. It's quite similar in spirit to what was represented for Mexico. So the deprivation cutoff deprives the population into two groups. One who are not deprived at all, and the other group who has at least one deprivation. Then, as was explained, the second cutoff is called dual cutoff by Professor Foster and Selina. It's 1/3 of weighted indicators, and that identifies the MPI pool, which is given by this area. Now, if we set a higher cutoff that in terms of intensity, we identify those who are deprived in half of weighted indicators. We call them intense poor, or they are in intense poverty. A second way of doing is to identify for each deprivation of for the 10 indicators, choose a more strict deprivation cutoff. That means a deeper deprivation cutoff for each of the 10 indicators. So those who are deprived in 1/3 of those deeper cutoff are called deeply poor, or in deep poverty. And then so we can divide the overall head-count ratio into 4 different groups. One, in red, they are both deeply poor and intense poor, then only intensely poor, only deeply poor, and we call moderate poor if they are neither intense poor nor deeply poor, but they are MPI poor. And we find, this is a positive news, that the overall MPI, the incidence of MPI poverty went down from 56.8% to 48%, nearly 15%. However, the incidence of deeply poor and intensely poor went down by 28%, which is definitely a positive news. We also try to see how we can use for policy analysis. So here is an example of 3 states with Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Uttar Pradesh, which reduced the incidence almost at the same amount. However, how this reduction in overall incidence occurred across these 3 states. You can see for Uttar Pradesh, the reduction actually came from a drastic reduction among the poorest of the poor, who are both deeply and intensely poor. So before we conclude, the positive aspects, reduction in multidimensional incidence per annum was larger than the reduction in income poverty or per capita expenditure poverty. Reduction has been larger in rural areas. Because of the lack of time, I could not explain in detail, but they are available in the brief, which is in your folder. The reduction has been largest among scheduled castes, and reduction in multidimensional poverty has been larger among those with high, they're extremely poor. However, concerns remains, at least between this period, we could not extend the study for later periods because of the lack of demographic health survey data for India. But at least in that period, the reduction was slowest among the poorest group to begin with in 1999. Also, there were no significant reduction for the female-headed household. So in DHS data, we found the share of people living in female-headed household increased from 7.5% to nearly 11.5%, a 4% increase. However, there was no significant change in multidimensional poverty. And also, it was probably very quick in Jose's slides. Jose also provided a comparison of many countries where India belongs. And India's reduction, at least in that period, was much slower than the reduction in multidimensional poverty of Nepal and Bangladesh. The final slide, as Seth mentioned already, that for all the DHS computations, we used only 39 questions out of the 65 questions in the DHS. So it did not require a long questionnaire. And of course, you already have seen the presentations from our experience of Mexico and Colombia. I don't think I need to mention that. Thank you.